Welcome to Dead Man Talking. Tonight's show is a short story compilation of a couple of good stories that I found over the last month or so. As ever, please do let us know what you thought down below in the comments box. Please do like and share. It really does help with the channel and our community further. And why not hashtag TeamFEAR. And so, with that aside, let's get into tonight's first story, entitled "A cave in my hometown was said to be haunted, but we found something much worse inside." Let's get straight into that. In the 1930s, a kid from my hometown named Lenny was playing in a cave when he was crushed by a rock slide within. Legend has it that he has haunted it ever since. Hence, the name given to the cave was Lennyland, which was later spray-painted in black graffiti on the wall of its first room by teenagers like me that liked exploring the cave. My friend Carlos and I discovered Lennyland during a summer break. It was nestled in a woodland area of a golf course, and so it was easy enough to sneak in. We scoured the complex cave system that summer, exploring every level and room it had to offer. We eventually got bored of going through the cave ourselves, and so we started to invite our classmates along with us. Every time we brought somebody new, we recounted the legend of Lennyland, just to heighten their experience of going through. It was a game to us, and seeing the cave explored through the eyes of new people made it even seem adventurous again. One night, I was leading a few new friends into Lennyland. Getting into the caves was a bit dangerous because there was a steep drop into the first room. You had to slide on your butt, hang from a horizontal access plank, and then drop yourself in. After I dropped in, I guided everyone in verbally and helped lower in people who didn't want to do the drop. Once everyone was in, I pointed my flashlight to the graffiti on the wall and said, "Welcome to Lennyland." They all pointed their flashlights across the rock walls and the sandy floor of the cave. It was already nearly pitch black because of the vertical drop-in. "This looks like a place people come to hook up or do drugs," said one of the newcomers named Candice. "You're not wrong," I said. "That's why we come during the daytime." I guided them towards the second room and said, "The only problem with coming in the daytime is that's when the nocturnal animals are sleeping here." I crouched slightly to get into the second room, and the others followed close behind. "Nocturnal animals? Like bats?" asked a tall friend named Brandon. "Bats and—" I pointed my flashlight at the corner where a black furred thing crouched and leaned its head. It got up on two legs and turned to face us, and it started making gorilla grunts as it ran towards us. My friend screamed and then went silent for a moment as Carlos took off his gorilla mask and laughed uncontrollably. He took off the rest of the costume and put it in his backpack, laughing all the while. "That's not funny," said Nora as she turned to her friends. "I knew we shouldn't have come." Candice and Brandon took it a bit better. My laughing was under control, and so I tried to comfort Nora in a hushed tone. "Shh, please don't yell." Carlos added in, "Yeah, you might make the rocks fall if you're too loud." Nora's face went pale. "Take me out now," Candice intervened and calmly suggested. "Maybe we can escort her out and meet back at the car after we're done." "Yes," said Nora. All right, we're sorry," I said. "There's a way out of the cave, not many rooms away from here. It's safer for exiting." We led everyone to the cave's exit. It was a rocky path about a 45-degree angle upwards that led to the exit hole, and so you could get on all fours and crawl up relatively easily. "Meet you at the car," said Nora grumpily. I had never seen someone crawl as quickly as she did to get out of that cave. I whispered to Carlos, "I think you ruined your chances with her, bro." He scoffed, and the four of us remained to go spelunking deeper into the cave. We decided to take them down deeper to the second level. "Keep your flashlights on the ground in this next room," said Carlos. "What? Why?" Candice asked. "Bats sleeping on the roof. Just don't talk or shine your light on them. We'll be fine." "Actually, let's grab hands and turn our lights off completely," I suggested. We crept through the room hand in hand as quickly and silently as possible. Candice exhaled a breath of relief when we crawled through a small entryway into the next room. "No more bats?" she asked. "No," I said. "We can turn our lights back on." She turned her flashlight on. Right away her light blinded two people in hazmat suits in the middle of the room who were kneeling around a small laboratory. They made suppressed yells at us and guarded their eyes from the light. I couldn't make out any words they were saying, but their gestures made it look like they were afraid of something, or maybe even warning us. They threw the glass beakers they were holding onto their lab table, and it caught fire. They bolted past us and dove through the crawlway. They were screaming as they made for the exit, and I heard hisses coming from the room we were just in. "Back! Back!" yelled Carlos. "We need to leave!" He went for the crawl space we just came through, but a flood of hissing and screeching bats rushed through, hoping to reach a deeper part of the cave where they could rest undisturbed. Carlos flew backward as the bats crashed into him. "Duck!" I dropped to the ground and guarded the back of my exposed head with my hands. Their fluttering wings and hissing continued for what felt like 5 minutes, and when it finally ended, I got up to see Carlos whimpering with bleeding cuts on his face. "It's okay," I told him. "We will be fine. Right now, we need to move." "Guys," said Candice as she pointed to the lab. The fire was raging, and smoke filled the entire room. I took a deep breath in, realizing I was inhaling the smoke from what was likely a meth lab. All of us scrambled back for the crawl space. Brandon threw his arms backward to push us away. I was starting to feel dizzy, and so I stood back and watched the chaos for a moment as my fellow friends lost all regard for each other in their efforts of self-preservation. A rock fell from the ceiling and landed a few feet away from me. The smoke from the fire had no way to escape the cave, and so it was causing the cave to collapse in on itself. Then something happened to my eyes. There was a burning sensation, and I assumed it was just the smoke irritating them. But the dark walls of the cave began lighting up a grey-red filtered view. I could see everything clearly now through the coloured filter over my eyes. Everything was a bit too much. I looked at the ceiling of the room and saw an enormous black-coated spider spinning a web at a disturbingly fast pace. It was spelling letters into its web. When it finished spinning, it rested at the bottom and proudly admired its work. I read the words on the web. "Got you." I ran for the previous room, following Candice through the crawlspace, who was crying hysterically. I gave one look back at the giant spider on the cave ceiling. I thought I saw it lick its chops as it slowly lowered itself to the cave floor, using its web. We made it to the previous room. The rocks were falling around us more rapidly. I swore there was an eye on the back of my head watching as that disgusting spider used its 8 legs to push itself through the crawlspace. I shuddered at the thought, but didn't look back. I had to have been hallucinating. I was seeing fire along the cave walls. My skin felt like acid was tearing at it. I saw human faces and eyeballs along the walls too. It was as if they were an audience looking down on me and watching with interest as I battled for my life. I heard a thud and a scream ahead of me. As I ran by, Brandon was unconscious on the ground with a bloody forehead. He nailed his head on a low-dipping ceiling between rooms. He must have forgotten to duck. I tried grabbing his arms, but my hands were too slow, and they were moving towards him at a snail's pace. He started to sink into the sand floor. The sand quickly enveloped him, and his body disappeared into the earth. My hands grasped at the sand, which slipped through the cracks of my fingers. It started slipping through the lines of my palms, and so I dropped it and ran towards the cave exit. I followed Carlos and Candice, but I felt my feet dragging as if in mud. I heard the quick pattering of spider legs close behind me, but I couldn't run away faster. My legs were sluggish. The spider surpassed me and crawled along the wall, trying to catch my friends ahead of me. We got to the exit that Nora took earlier, and I saw Candice scrambling for daylight on all fours. She was almost there. Just a few more paces to freedom. She leapt into the light of the cave's exit hole, but her body floated there immobile. She was suspended in mid-air, and I knew she was caught in a web. The spider crawled slowly along the web, and she scrambled and screamed, trying to break free. It crawled until it enveloped the whole cave exit in the darkness, like an eclipsed sun, and Candice's screams stopped abruptly. Carlos turned and ran back towards me, and we both raced for the only other possible exit. As we sprinted through the rooms, choruses of voices pierced my brain. I saw shadows and outlines of people who had gone through the cave before. Some of them wore hazmat suits, and some adorned black robes with red webbed masks. Some were just stupid teenagers like us who came to have a good time. I rushed past them all, no longer feeling slowed by the sound. Carlos and I were neck and neck as we entered the first room of Lennyland. He arrived first, and he jumped for the horizontal wooden plank, his hands wrapped around the plank, but he couldn't pull his body up. The spider was already on the wall next to the wooden plank. I watched as it stuck Carlos's hand to the plank with its web and started spinning him into a silk cocoon. "No!" Carlos screamed. "Man, you gotta help me, please!" I closed my eyes, sat down, and accepted my doom as Carlos was wrapped like a mummy. I knew it was done when his yells were muffled to complete silence by the silk covering his mouth. This was the last way out. No sense in fighting anymore. And then I heard a child's voice. "Get up," he said. I scanned the room and saw a silver-outlined boy dressed in ragged church clothes and armed with a slingshot. Small rocks were falling all around us, and I knew it was only a matter of time before the cave buried us. The boy grabbed a rock and loaded it into his sling. He pulled back and fired a shot at the spider. It hissed as it was struck in one of its eyes. He picked up another rock and reloaded his sling. "Last chance," he said. The spider focused its attention on the boy and lunged for him as he let his rock fly. I got my feet, lifted my arms up and jumped for the plank. I jumped so high that I overshot and landed on the plank with my feet. I jumped again, this time straight towards the sun in the sky that was guiding me back. I imagined that it was pulling me towards it until the earth called me back. The soft leaves of the forest floor caught me as I fell into their embrace. The next thing I remember was waking up in a hospital with a cast on my leg. When the police visited and asked about the cave-in, I was careful to leave the hallucinations and giant spider out of my explanation of what happened. It was far worse receiving visits from the high school friends. I expected people to hate me, but it turned out that they just felt sorry for me. Even Nora visited and cried with me over the death of our friends. My parents drove me home from the hospital the following day. They tried to talk me through my feelings. I considered telling them the truth for a moment, but I quickly rejected that idea. Maybe they would believe me and give me some meaningless words of solace. If they didn't believe me, they would think I had lost my mind. And so I decided to just try and move on. I threw myself onto my bed that night, feeling safer now that I was home. And with the help of prescription medicine from a doctor, I was able to sleep. I woke up in a daze to a red-grey filter over my eyes. I could see everything in the room, despite the lights being out. And there was a fresh, silky web with letters in one of the corners of my room where the ceiling meets the wall. It read, "Not over." Here there be dragons. Let's get straight into that. Note from author. I originally posted this to No Sleep, but some hater flagged it as bandwagoning, even though I spent 2 months writing this. While the premise isn't exactly original, I've read about 10 stories like this on No Sleep alone. The story is mine. Thought I'd throw it up to this subreddit to see how you guys like it. Anyway, here goes. In 1997, an unusual sound was recorded by the Equatorial Pacific Ocean Autonomous Hydrophone Array of the southernmost tip of South America, NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, later released the recording, which was promptly dubbed the Bloop. NOAA admitted there was no known source of the sound, but did report that it was not man-made. It was posited at the time that the source of the bloop was most likely a large marine animal, but this theory held some doubts, as the sound would have indicated a more powerful source than any known animal on Earth. Theories abounded regarding the source of the bloop. Everything from whales to old gods of Lovecraftian legend were attributed to the strange sound. The internet buzzed with speculation for a time, and an interest slowly died. In 2012, the general consensus in the scientific community was that the bloop was caused by nothing more mysterious than an ice shelf carving off the coast of Antarctica. I'm here to tell you that this is false. I am writing here using a false alias in an attempt to release the truth. I am not sure if this will work though. Today though, I thought I heard a faint clicking on my phone line. They know I've defected. They know I can't keep this secret any longer. The world needs to know the truth. Perhaps I should start at the beginning. I was a scientific officer for the NOAA, Commissioned Officer Corps, working on an NOAA ship in the South Pacific. The ship's name and names of my fellow officers I will keep anonymous for their safety. And shortly after the bloop was recorded, our ship received orders to relocate to the Southern Ocean, approximately 400 nautical miles north of the Ross Sea. No details were given to us at the time. The area was merely flagged as possible interest. We anticipated a routine inspection of the area, throw out a few sensor buoys, get a few readings, maybe even release a weather balloon or two. Routine inspection. Upon our arrival to the designated zone, we were instructed to ready the 2-man submersible for deployment in 30 hours. As the sub was only brought out for more than high-profile missions, this of course generated much interest on the ship. Rumours spread like wildfire, but with nothing concrete to go on. These rumours amounted to nothing more than entertainment for the crew. Ships are a small place, after all. And with the preparations for the submersible complete, 2 men were selected to crew the mission. Myself and a fellow officer with experience driving the sub. For this time, I will call him Dave, though this isn't his real name. And we're given the honours. I use this term sarcastically now, though at the time I was genuinely pleased at my selection. How soon I would wish otherwise. We boarded the sub and made our final preparations for our dive. We were given the coordinates of our objective, and the submersible plunged into the icy depths of the Southern Ocean. As the cold waters closed over our viewing dome, I could barely contain my excitement. The coordinates had us travelling to a previously unexplored depth within an ocean trench. The ocean floor is a vast area, with little of it actually seen by human eyes. I couldn't believe that I was getting the chance to be the first in this trench. We sank deeper and deeper into the dark ocean depths. Sunlight faded quickly as we descended swiftly through the twilight zone and into the dark reaches of the midnight zone. Dave and I chatted softly while we watched the glowing instrument panel as it quietly hummed and clicked. Meter after meter melted away as the last vestiges of light from the surface faded from our view. Cold darkness enveloped us as we descended in our sub, the vessel made small by the vast ocean surrounding us. Time seemed to stand still during our endless descent, but eventually we gazed upon the featureless expanse of the abyssal plain. Pale eels gracefully passed below us as we glided above the bedrock. Tube worms the size of your arm waved delicate cilia in the sluggish current, fishing for small edible particles. Small crabs picked their way through the detritus of uncounted years of fallen debris from the surface. The plain must be an underwater desert, but all deserts hold life if you know where to look. Dave and I reluctantly tore our gazes from these rarely seen creatures and refocused on our mission. Roughly 100 meters from here was our objective, an unexplored trench of an unknown depth. We continued on and shortly came to the sharp edge of the trench. Dave adjusted a few dials on the instrument panel and gave me a look over his shoulder. "Ready?" he said. I nodded in agreement and slowly exhaled a breath I didn't realize I was holding. He nodded back, and soon the trench walls were gliding past the sub. On and on we descended, with the rock wall ever to our right and the vast darkness to our left. Occasionally we would see a flash of bioluminescence off in the distance, but as we went deeper into the trench, these flashes were seen less and less, and then none at all. I had begun to daydream as the monotony of the descent began to set in. Dave broke this daydream with a yelp. "Did you see that?" he exclaimed, whirling in his chair towards me. "No," I replied, trying to mentally recover from my zoned-out state. "I'm afraid I wasn't looking," I admitted. "The rock, it looked, I don't know, scraped, like something huge had run down the side," Dave said, looking confused at what he was trying to describe. "Rockfall?" I suggested, but Dave shook his head and returned to guiding the sub ever deeper into the trench. Now, I looked out at the dome with sharpened interest, but nothing else of note was seen for some time. Dave again cried out, but this time it was to announce the approach of the bottom of the trench. He set a course southward along the trench approximately 8 meters above the floor. We cruised along for some time, marveling at the various zoological wonders before us. There were species here that had never been seen by man before. I gripped Dave's shoulder in excitement, and Dave grinned up at me. Suddenly, various dials and gauges on the sub's instrument panel began flashing and whirling frantically. "What's happening? What's wrong?" I asked, choking on a swiftly rising lump of fear. Equipment malfunctions while nearly 6 miles down in the ocean was not something I wanted to experience. "I don't know," he replied. Dave's fingers flew across the panel, adjusting knobs and dials at a rapid pace. "Everything went dark for a second, and then it just went crazy." Dave spoke calmly. However, I could hear contained fear in his voice. But Dave is one of the best sub-operators I know. If anyone can get us out of a jam, it will be him. After several tense minutes, Dave gave a grunt of satisfaction and leaned back. "There. Looks like I got most of the problem solved. Depth readings are back to normal. Directional systems are operational, and life support is operating within normal parameters. However, the compass is still acting up. We're heading almost due south before the instrument started acting up, but now the compass says that we are traveling northeast, and we haven't changed direction. I hate to say this, but we should abort the mission. We can't do anything if we don't know where we're going." As Dave was speaking, I noticed a soft bluish glow ahead of us. Dave's speech trailed off into a surprised silence. This deep in the ocean, there was no light except for the small bioluminescence of deep-sea animals. No fish could be making the glow we saw in that moment. We both looked at each other, and in an unspoken agreement, Dave directed the sub in a direction of the glow. In that moment, we both knew that, due to our malfunctioning instruments, the safest course of action would be to terminate the mission and return to the surface. But that glow, it aroused our deepest curiosity, and neither one of us could bear to leave now that we had seen it. Oh, how I wish we had. We moved ever closer to the mysterious glow when suddenly the sub crossed the edge of a massive precipice and the trench floor fell away. We found ourselves cruising above a tremendous expanse, an abyss of unrelatable proportions, thousands of meters below us. My eyes widened in awe as I beheld the vast space before us. No trench had ever yielded such a view. Monolithic rock formations soared above our heads, while below us were trenches that could swallow a skyscraper. Massive boulders loomed in the distance, and all the while the ever-present soft glow of cerulean light gently illuminated this vast underwater landscape. The effect was otherworldly. Our attention was pulled away from the awesome sight below us by the shrill alarms of our instruments. The gauges again began to wildly swing while several warning lights started to flash. Suddenly, the sub went dark. "The power went out! The sub is dead!" Dave exclaimed, fear colouring his voice. He fruitlessly worked at the dead instruments panel with no results, and only the dim bluish glow emanating from the chasm below us lit the interior of the sub. I sat frozen while Dave began opening the various access panels located throughout the submarine. Our small vessel, with no power or engines, began to feel very fragile indeed as we drifted above that eerie landscape. We drifted along in silence, the only sounds the frenzied clanking and thumping as Dave struggled to restore power to the sub. And slowly though, it dawned on me that the sounds of Dave working weren't the only sounds I heard. A loud, low thrumming filled my ears, almost too low to hear it, throbbed in my bones with a maddeningly rhythmic motion. I signalled to Dave to stop working for a moment, and we both sat quietly listening to this unusual sound. We peered nervously through the submarine's viewing dome, straining against the dim light for any glimpse of the source of that sound. Suddenly, my eyes caught movement below. "There!" I pointed. "Did you see that?" I thought I saw something move behind the boulder. Practically glued to the viewing dome, Dave and I stared in the direction of the movement, and after a few moments we spotted yet more motion. However, to our dawning horror, we realized that the movement I had previously seen wasn't behind any rocks. What we had mistaken for a giant rockfall was not a collection of boulders or debris, as we assumed it was. To our terror and dismay, we beheld a titanic limb ending in massive talons. These talons, each 1 meter longer than our submarine, slowly opened and closed to the rhythmic pattern of the incredible low sound that thrummed through our bones. All thoughts of continuing our exploration fled our minds. Panicked, Dave resumed his efforts to fix the sub with frantic energy. I myself have no training in the repairs of submarines, but I helped Dave wherever I could. Suddenly, the sub lurched violently sideways with a deafening thump. We were both thrown to our feet by a forceful impact. We glanced up to see an immense, finned tail sweep past us as it swiftly faded out of sight into the vast depths below. The sub lurched again in the massive current caused by the tail's passing. The loud thrumming got louder, and I could barely think with that tremendous booming rattling my brain, but somehow Dave managed to get to his feet and resume repairs on the sub. A nightmarish scream filled the cabin, knocking us to the floor. We threw our hands over our ears in an attempt to block the horrendous sound. Blood filled my palms while I arrived on the sub deck. The sound of that awful scream felt like it went on for eternity, but when it stopped, its absence was nearly as painful as its presence. Dave said something to me, but I could hear nothing but a hellish ringing in my ears. We scrambled to our feet yet again and beheld a vista seen nowhere but man's worst nightmares. A titanic wall of scaled flesh rose from the trench's glowing depths. The wall writhed and coiled, rising high above our sub in a deep trench. Dimly, I could see an unholy disarrangement of limbs and fins in a configuration not previously deemed possible by science. A second glow of light joined the first, swiftly getting brighter and brighter, and soon a massive bony head rose into view, with 6 glowing eyes pinning our tiny sub with its baleful gaze. The colossal beast opened its mouth in another deafening roar, showing off a gargantuan fangs and a throat that could easily swallow a small cruise liner. The sub heaved and bucked in the current of the sound and water. I sat paralysed by fear, too numb to even think. I could only silently scream at the nightmarish behemoth as it swept towards us. Suddenly, the lights in the sub glared into existence around me. Dave wasted no time, hurriedly shoving me out of his way as he ran back to the pilot's chair. He quickly threw the propellers into gear as fast as they would go and began turning the sub back towards the entrance of this nightmarish place. The sub bucked and heaved, buffeted by the incredible currents created by our monstrous pursuer. Another scream ripped through the cabin, though the rear-viewing dome, I could see the malevolent glow of the creature's 6 eyes grow closer as it gained ground on us. It roared, and once again revealing rows of hideous fangs. "Dave!" I screamed in panic as the sub lurched under the glancing talon strike. "It's gonna catch us!" I know! Dave shouted back, furiously working the controls. His eyes were wide and I could see sweat dampening his hairline. "On our way in, I thought I saw a cave in the trench wall. If we're lucky, it will connect somewhere. There's no way we're going to outrun this thing." Another talon struck to the sub confirmed his words, and I was thrown to my feet, but Dave managed to retain his position at the controls. An alarm shrieked as several warning lights began flashing on the dash. "It's knocked out one of our propellers," Dave exclaimed. I groaned, sick with fear. I could feel the sub slowing as the damaged propeller lost power. The gnashing sound of the gargantuan teeth was sickeningly close. Just then Dave cried out in relief and sent the sub diving sharply downward. I heard one of the last shrieks of the malevolent rage, and then all went dark. Dave had found the cave. The interior of the cave was a thick inky black. None of this sick bluish light from the hellish trench reached here. Dave slumped in relief and then began reviewing the instruments. "Well, I got good news and I got bad news," he said solemnly. "Good news is that the sonar readings indicate that this cave does indeed have another entrance. Bad news is, if we're wrong about those readings, we won't have enough clean air to make it back out. Though, given what we just barely avoided, I'm not sure that going back is an option." I agreed and settled down in my chair. I wanted to conserve as much energy and air as possible. Dave resumed piloting the damaged submarine through the dark underwater cave passage. Time passed slowly as the rough cave walls glided past us, and some of the passages narrowed down to a harrowing degree. Only Dave's skilled piloting got us through those passages as the sharp rocks screeched along our hull. After a while, the cave widened, and I dozed fitfully as we cruised silently along the rocky passage. After what felt like hours, Dave gently shook my shoulder. "Good news," he said quietly. "I found an opening in the cave. We're headed through now, and then I'll begin our ascent." I roused myself to see Dave piloting us through a narrow opening in the rock. He adjusted the dials and switches before him, and the sub began to gently ascend towards the surface. Already, I could see the rocky trench wall slipping swiftly past our sub. I slumped back into my chair in exhausted relief. Our ordeal was nearly over. We broke the surface into a blustery cold day with no other craft in sight. Dave set the SOS beacon and we settled down to wait. The agitated seas rocked the sub violently, threatening seasickness, but neither one of us could complain. Our ship located us 15 hours later, and Dave and I were immediately separated and put into solitary quarters upon our arrival to the ship. We were told it was for our health and well-being. Right. Within mere minutes of my interment, I found myself being questioned by the men I had never seen aboard the ship before. They asked me what I had seen down in the trench. They drilled me for every minute detail. I answered the best I could, being in a state of shock and, honestly, not even being sure what I had seen. After several hours and without warning, the mysterious men packed up their notes and abruptly left. I remained in solitary confinement for the rest of our tour, and was warned upon landfall that I should never speak of my experiences in the trench. The consequences were not clearly related to me, but I was given the impression that I would not want to find out what they were. I attempted to speak to Dave in private, but his terse reaction cut me off short. I've sat in silence for nearly 20 years, and I can't take it anymore. There is something down there in the deepest reaches of our oceans, something that could threaten us all, and they don't want you to know about it. The thing is, I don't think I just saw one creature. In the midst of the chaos, while clutching my head in anguish from the deafening screams of that hellish nightmare, in the dusky light of that Stygian trench, I thought I caught a glimpse of eggs. Hundreds of them. Shit. Someone is at my door. It's them. They've found me. I'll upload this as fast as I can go to get the message out. People have to know. Wow. Absolutely awesome deep sea adventure there. What a terrifying experience that would be. Hundreds of meters down or miles down underneath the ocean surface on the seabed, in unexplored territories, dealing with unknown creatures of gigantic proportions. Ugh, what a nightmare. As ever, guys and girls, please do take time to check out the author's wonderful Reddit. Of course, I'll leave the link to that in the description box. I implore you to please leave a upvote or a nice comment. It really does help them build their presence as writers on the Reddit platform. As ever, you know the drill here. Please do let us know what you thought down below in the comments box. Please do like and share. It really does help build the channel and our community further. And why not hashtag TeamFEAR. Of course, if you have a story to share with us here on the show, you can get that to myself over on the website, which is www.dmtforestofear.com. Or of course, if it's simpler for you to just email me, it's at dmtforestofear@gmail.com. I look forward to hearing from you. Well, I hope you've all had a lovely working week, whether you're working or studying. And above all, I'm looking forward to a really relaxing weekend with good food, friends and family. But above all, remember, be safe, not sorry.